recording. All right, well, my name is Morgan Cummins. I'm a counselor at the high school. I'm a counselor for students with last names P through Z. Joining me tonight is Christine Johnson. She's counselor for students H through O. And Kristen Areno is here as well. She's our career and CT counselor, and she helps a lot with our students with their career inventory and their college pathway. So we really appreciate them being here tonight. I want to give you guys a little bit of rundown of some things that we have been doing with your students. So we just recently met with all our junior to rising seniors to make sure they're picking the right classes for their senior year. No need to panic yet. We do have until the end of the school year if there's anything we do want to change with your schedule, but we're making sure that everybody's staying on track with their UCA through D requirements, making sure they're taking all the right classes to set them up for college. We're through most of our rising sophomores as well, so a few more to get to, but we've gone through the registration process there. We've been talking to our juniors, and I think our guest for the night, Greg Kaplan, is going to speak a little bit more about this, but we are still encouraging SAT and ACT. There is a lot of talk out there about test optional schools, and yes, public schools in California have moved to test optional, but there's still a lot of private schools and schools outside of California that are still requiring SAT and ACT. So we think it's good to keep your options open if you want to have more options when it comes to the college process. We're hoping that this is going to go for about an hour and hoping to be done by 7:30 to answer the question in the chat. Other things we've been doing, we did meet with all the juniors in the assembly right before winter break, where we had everybody log into SCORE. For all you parents of juniors, SCORE is going to be the platform that we are going to use for all the college documentation, so transcripts, letters of rec, all that fun stuff, colleges that students are applying to is all going to be done through SCORE. So your students should, at this point, know how to log in. If they do not, they can contact one of the counselors and we can provide them the information that they need to be able to log in. But it's really important that you guys are getting familiar with SCORE, and that's spelled SCOIR, SCORE, because that's the platform that we are going to use through this college process. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, Greg Kaplan. Greg is an expert when it comes to the college process. He's working on his second book that just talks about parents navigating this process with their students and how they can best support them. Greg also runs a test prep company, so he knows everything that comes to do with this upcoming year and a half in terms of the process of trying to choose the right college for you. So we really appreciate him taking time and being here tonight. So turn it over to you, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for the introduction. And to everyone who is joining us tonight, thank you so much as well for your time. We are going to make this relatively casual, and if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will try to answer them when it's relevant to my conversation or this presentation. And today is just going to be a conversation, and I want to talk about, really, I think the goal of today is to discuss the timing for the admissions process. I'm speaking to an audience of oh, I think someone may. Okay, is it getting a little bit of backplay or? Okay, no, we're good. If everyone could just make sure that we're muted, that would be much appreciated. And yes, this is being recorded and will be available, made available to parents at a later time as well. But today, what I'd like to talk about, this is a presentation for the junior class, and we're doing this at the end of March, 2022. You can think about this as a 9-month sprint, or you can think about it as a 9-month marathon, but whichever way you want to think about it, the good news is by hopefully New Year's Eve of this year, your child who is a junior at Coronado will be done with this process. So today we're going to talk about things to think about between now and when we start applying, and also how to gear up for this application process itself. So we're going to talk about this in 2 phases. 1, getting ready to apply, and then 2, when the time comes to start applying, what does that look like? I think even before we get to that, and again, thank you in advance for just ensuring that your microphones are muted. But if what I think would be helpful is, and I know some of the folks in attendance tonight have attended webinars that I've done for Coronado High School families in the past. But I think it's just very helpful to make sure we all are operating with the same set of facts and how this process works. So I may be just manually muting folks that are not muted. Thank you. How does the college admissions process work? When you're a kid, or if you are the student attending this, even more power to you, when you click the send button, your application will go through a two-step review process. The first step is going to be a review of the numbers, which consists of your transcript from Coronado High. And if you chose to take the SAT or ACT, which I'll talk about in a moment, and the school accepts that test score, that score as well. And if collectively those numbers, transcript test scores, meet the academic standards that the admissions office sets for the applicant pool, then you move into the second round of this process, where they will go ahead and open up your application and read the essays and activity descriptions that you include to understand one key question, which is, what is your ability to add value to the college? And the stronger your value proposition is, the stronger your odds are of earning admission to those schools. So with the first step, the numbers. High school is 4 years of one's life, but an admissions officer will spend a whopping 5 minutes or less reviewing your applications. And in this past year, the UCs are in the process of releasing their admissions decisions. This year, UCLA was, again, the most applied to college in the country. They received just shy of 150,000 applications for 5,000 spots. The reason I bring this up is to help illustrate how important numbers are, and also for any parents on this call who applied to UCLA not in 2021, is just to remind every parent on this call how different this process is from when we were all applying to college. There are, in some cases, 6, 7, 8 times the number of applicants applying. This process has become way more competitive. So I'm not saying this to discourage anyone or give them, a heart attack at 6:40 p.m. in the evening, but it's really just to set realistic expectations and for all of us to adopt a position of, let's just give this our best shot and do what we can do to see what options we can have. So with the numbers, so many people applying and the number of applications has increased since the pandemic started, to the shock of anyone who's involved in this space. With this process, they're going to do a very quick review of the transcript. Every college has a different academic standard. And what I encourage families to focus on is not, oh, did I take 80 million AP classes? Because as we've mentioned in past webinars, it's not just who takes the most challenging classes, but it's who does well in the classes that are relevant for them. And they're very focused on hiccups. And what I like to encourage families to think of this process as is, it's a lot like your driver's license. Every grade that is not to whatever standard the school sets is considered a point on your record. And when with our driver's license, you get 3 accidents or moving violations in a year before they yank the license, there's a certain number of grades less than an A that an admissions officer will say, hey, do I need to keep reading this application, or no, I don't. And I think it's so important, and I was talking about this with Christine prior to this conversation, is just to make sure that we have realistic backup schools. Because when there's 150,000 people applying to a school like UCLA or 120,000 applying to UC Irvine, academic standards are just very, very high. And so it's so important to start to think about building an appropriate school list. Yes, you can have the Reaches, the UCLAs, the USCs, the Berkeleys of the world, the Stanfords, but the question is what other schools are going to bring you closer to your long-term goals? And so when I have a student that's interested in, say, computer science or business, I'm encouraging them to apply to schools like Santa Clara up in San Jose. Because why? They have one of the strongest pipeline feeder programs into the tech companies that when people say, I have to go to Stanford and a student's in my office because I want to go be the next Mark Zuckerberg, I always want to let them know that there are many ways to skin this cat when it comes to our educations. And there's not one college that has a monopoly on the path to success. But the academics, if you may have found, or your child may have found the cure for cancer or won the Nobel Prize, but if you don't have the academics that meet their standards, it's very hard to convince an admissions officer to actually open up your application and read the essays where you would then be writing about how you are the greatest thing since sliced bread because you did find the cure for cancer. So sometimes I like to, say this, a little bit in jest, but I think it's so important for as students just to focus on doing the best they can to finish out their junior year strong. A recommendation for all students who are attending this, or parents of students, is that a great way to add additional rigor without signing up for one additional AP class as a senior, which may be unnecessary or unhealthy, is if you're interested, say, in engineering, look at a Southwestern College Intro to Engineering or more advanced engineering class as a way to add another college level class this summer if you're looking for something to do to demonstrate academic passion. So there are ways to, demonstrate and add to your transcript even at this stage in the game if you're worried about that. But, when it comes to building a school list and the academic standards, I would just say in a group presentation that is, unique and individual as student, and I'll be sharing my contact information and always happy to provide feedback as an organization about what schools make sense based on where your transcript currently is. But at this moment, halfway through second semester of junior year, I would say focus on getting the best grades you can. The better your grades are, the more options you may have to make in the second round. And we just need to be honest and realistic when it comes to what these academic standards are, particularly at schools that are receiving over 100,000 applications, which is for essentially the entire UC system, and San Diego State, Cal Poly slow. So it's just not the same process even from a couple of years ago. So that's on the transcript side. The second component of numbers, and Morgan referenced this, is the SAT or the ACT. The UCs and Cal States are barred from using test scores as part of their admissions decisions. If you are a parent of a current senior who just applied, you will have seen that there was a spot actually to put in test scores into the UC and Cal State apps. That was only for placement out of remedial English and math. They can't look at it, the admissions officers. Private universities and out-of-state public universities are still accepting the SAT and ACT with the exception of a few schools. And what the results have shown, since every college in the country went test optional with the pandemic, is that 75% of students admitted to highly selective universities that were admitted did submit test scores. And if you are coming from a school or a community where they know that you have the focus on education and the resources and time to invest in test prep and the test prep process, they will expect to see a test score from you. Now, I grew up on Coronado as a very young kid before we moved a little further up the coast. And I think if we're looking for a community where they would know if they want to see test scores, Coronado is definitely one of them. And I would encourage students to look into the testing process if you haven't. This is not one of those things where we want to put our head in the sand and just pretend that it's optional, it won't help. I was telling Christine earlier and she was asking how some of the students that we work with were doing. Our students that have been admitted to the highly selective schools, the Ivy, Stanford, the Claremont colleges, that have found out so far, most of my students that have been admitted to these very selective schools did submit test scores. And it really does come down to an analysis of the type of community you're coming from. And I think have a sense of, what is coastal San Diego like, whether it's Coronado or La Jolla or Del Mar. So we are always happy to provide recommendations for test prep strategies. Your library at school has fantastic test prep resources if you want to do it on your own, and so does the Coronado Public Library as well. I've seen it with my own eyes there as well. So there are resources online, there are tutors, there are group classes. It doesn't matter which test you take, all colleges are agnostic. And my recommendation would be to look at the test score ranges of admitted students or of the applicant pool and shoot for those numbers. Because if you're in that range, i.e. for USC, on the stats on their website that are reported to the Department of Education, right now on the ACT, it's a 32 to a 35 for the middle 50%. We want to shoot for that range to be a competitive applicant. If we don't have that score, you don't submit, because you have everything to gain by getting that score, nothing to lose if you don't, because you don't have to submit it. And colleges will never know if you came up short. So if we haven't looked into test prep and we are gunning for these very selective universities, we just need to be honest with, do we want to put all of our eggs in being the exception to the rule basket, or do we want to give them what they're looking for? So testing, as Morgan mentioned, for out-of-state and private schools, in-state or out-of-state, can help. And for families that are looking for scholarships to either out-of-state public or private universities, we are still finding a very strong correlation between the test score exceeding the school's average with who's getting scholarships and who's not. So putting in the 100 hours that it may take this summer to get a really great test score may end up paying for part or all of college. And I challenge any 17-year-old who's not a famous influencer on TikTok to show me something where they could spend 100 hours and potentially make 300 grand to pay for college. So, and if you can make more than that, you're doing just fine. Maybe college, maybe you don't need to go in general. And I'm sure there's some parent of a wannabe TikTok influencer who's like, why are you saying this to my child right now? But it's true. So look into test prep if that's part of your goals. And if it's not, that's fine too. So we've talked about numbers, and I think this really just requires an honest assessment of one's transcript. If you're shooting for a school that has a 5% acceptance rate, and we don't have, we're pretty far off of having, you have to ask yourself if they're rejecting 95% of students who are applying, is the transcript competitive or not for a school that is just so selective? And it's okay if it's not. But we've talked about the numbers, which get you to the point where they open up your application, grades and test scores. That gets you to the point where you're like, okay, now what? And it's no longer does Timmy or Bobby or Susie down the street have better grades at that point or a better test score. That's not how the analysis works. Once grades and test scores are threshold figures, and if you have them, it's, like I said, no longer who has better, it's okay, who can demonstrate their ability to add value to the college as told through their activity statements or their activity descriptions and the essays that they include for the schools. And the three key traits that college admissions officers are looking for in these essays and activity descriptions are grit, leadership, and passion. Now, grit, your child may play a sport, and they may be getting beat up chasing for a field hockey ball or playing lacrosse or shoved underwater in water polo. And as an athlete, I would agree with you, there is grit there. But the way a college admissions officer defines grit for this process, particularly in a community where, a lot of, where affluence sometimes leads to entitlement, is can this applicant handle life's day-to-day challenges? And the only way you can do that and dispel any notions of what the applicant is capable of achieving for herself relative to the strings that mom and dad are pulling in the background is getting a part-time job. Because if you can deal with a difficult boss or coworkers that just really rub you the wrong way, or even a Karen that just goes berserk on you for putting the wrong milk in a latte, you can deal with anything. And college admissions officers recognize the value of having this in other communities, and maybe it's just more common to work out of necessity if someone wants spending money. And so they're holding us all applicants to a universal standard of what experiences should people be going through to develop. And this is a great opportunity if we haven't had a part-time job already this summer, and this is different from an internship, which I'll explain in a moment, working at Panera or bagging groceries at Vaughn's, just showing that you can hang in life. This would be a great summer. 1 day a week, 1 shift a week. It doesn't need to be the focal point, but it is truly one of the only check the box experiences because they want to know, are you developing the perspective to use something with your education? So part-time job is the way you demonstrate grit. Then on the leadership and the passion side, the UCs and many private universities and out-of-state public universities are going to ask questions along the lines of, what have you done to make your community a better place? Or how have you positively impacted others as a leader? And I want to challenge everyone who's listening to this call to take an honest assessment of what you have done to answer this question persuasively, because there are so many people applying today. And if a family asks, how do you differentiate yourself from the other 48% of college-bound high school seniors that have A grade point averages today? So again, half the applicant pool has A's. You have to really ask yourself, how do I differentiate myself? It's through the essays. And we will all want to make sure that we have experiences that we can reflect upon that show how to answer this. And so there's still time to develop this. If you're saying, gosh, I haven't done community service, or I really haven't been a leader in my community, there are so many problems and challenges we face as a society that there's no student or parent of a student listening today especially now that, society is reopened post, whatever stage of the pandemic we're coming out of, is that everyone has opportunities to get involved. And I want to inspire, I wouldn't say challenge, but inspire anyone to ask, am I truly making a difference? Because when I have families that ask me, like, why didn't my kid get into UCLA or UC Santa Barbara? And I was like, well, let's look at the essays. And you're writing about tutoring another kid in, say, Rancho Santa Fe or Coronado Island or Newport Beach, another kid that presumably could afford a tutor, but you're just like, okay, this is easy community service. College admissions officers or readers, they know this. And what I would really want to challenge everyone to do today is ask themselves, are they making an impact for someone who needs it on the service front? Because people are reading this and they want to admit people who are actually taking the time and understanding, how can I make an impact? And do you have the perspective, especially coming from a place like Coronado, where a lot of families are blessed with, resources that is, different than, say, 5 miles southeast of where the high school is located, is how can we demonstrate that we're aware that there's problems going on and that we're doing what we can within our power to help make, a difference, even if it's just for one person, but one person in need. And so I do encourage everyone to take stock of their service and stock of their leadership, because it's March. We still have time to make a difference in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, and colleges will reward that. So part of me today is hoping to encourage everyone to make the most of this process while there's still time to do it, and to tee you up to write very persuasive essays this summer. So let's take stock of our leadership. Let's take stock of our service. We're always happy to provide feedback and suggestions and guidance on activities or experiences that students can engage in that will actually lend themselves to that. But when people are looking for some kind of magic answer, or when they're seeing seniors that are not getting in and that have amazing grades or test scores, we really need to take a step back and say, hey, what else can we do or should be doing to grow? And more importantly, apart from the college admissions process, I think, if we're logging into this presentation, we're in a fortunate position where we have the time and the resources to be thinking about this process. Is that I just think from a human development standpoint, to heck whether you get into Stanford or San Francisco State, if you can make a difference for one person going through this process, you will have done something good for the world. And that's something, regardless of where you go to school, I think that's something that everyone should and should be proud of. So let's look for opportunities this summer and even in the spring to actually make a difference, because this is one of the few things in life where by doing right by others and yourself, you actually further your own goals. So these schools are going to ask, like I said, community service questions and leadership questions. Let's take stock of that. And let's not just make sure that we're banking our entire college application of being a president of a club that met once in the last 2 years, because that just doesn't lend itself to a persuasive application. Other colleges are going to ask, and some of the same schools are also going to ask questions about, what have you done to further your academic interest outside the classroom? Or why do you want to study at, insert this name of fancy university here? And what these questions are designed to answer and measure are, what have you done to further, one, discover and develop your academic interests? And so again, for parents of juniors, and what we're doing with students in our office, day in, day out, is making sure that they are engaged in experiences that show them growing as a person. It is okay not to know what you want to study in college, and depending on the major, you will have flexibility to change your mind with a couple big exceptions. Nursing, you got to go in nursing, and engineering and comp sci. It's very hard to change into those majors once you're there because they're fenced off programs. But what we want to encourage every student to do is expose themselves to what they may be interested in, because one, that will give you more purpose and meaning through this process. And two, if you, for example, say, I'm really interested in studying journalism or communications at your university, and I'm so excited about the new media classes, this class or that class and the different opportunities, it's much more persuasive to write an essay about that when you can reference the fact that you were, even if you were unpaid, as an intern at the local newspaper on Coronado. Or we had a student from Coronado High a few years ago who's now attending the University of Pennsylvania, who interned on a bilingual, binational, local free newspaper that's distributed in Southeast San Diego and in Tijuana. So he wrote about his interest in those issues that affect the border as part of his application. And I think it was just very, very persuasive and powerful to reference that experience. But again, you can't make that argument about why you're interested in a major if you haven't done anything to explore it. So community college classes, unpaid internships. I always joke, I never would have gone to law school had I interned for a lawyer other than my dad, because I discovered really quickly that the law wasn't for me. And that's why when people say, like, I think I want to do X or Y, even if you don't end up applying for that major, just to know at a young age that that's not for you, that's priceless. So again, doing right by you for your growth will help you in this process. So let's take stock of what we are doing this summer. Do we need to do test prep? Maybe. Should we take a community college class to discover if we want to be an engineer? If you're on the fence, I think so. Or are there opportunities to make a difference where you can discover more about yourself and others or the problems that exist in society? Absolutely. So there's not a right way to do this, but I think what we really want to make sure are heading into this application essay process, do we have experiences that demonstrate grit, leadership, and passion? If we don't, there's still time, but time is running out. So, and I apologize for speaking so quickly. There's just always so much to say, at least from my perspective on this topic. I'm just going to keep going. But what I have done so far is we've talked about how this process works. First, the numbers, and then the analysis of the essays and activity descriptions. I want to talk now about what does that look like when you actually apply. Applications will open this summer for out-of-state public and private universities. The UC system, the entire University of California system, uses one application, and the entire Cal State application, the entire California State University system uses the Cal State application. Other public and private schools may have their own unique applications or belong to either the coalition application or the common application. We want to, as we're thinking about the application process, get started this summer. Why? Because if you know any seniors or you have an older child, they will tell you when people complain about applying to college, what they're complaining about is the number of essays they have to write. Every school that is private or out-of-state public will have one main essay that's called the personal statement. The flyer I'm going to be sharing with people attending today, you can email us for 2 chapters from my book, Earning Admission, with analysis of essays that work and essays that don't. But this is one 500 to 650 word essay. So it's just 1 page, single spaced of text where you can tell your story, and you can write about anything. What you shouldn't necessarily write about is how you're the greatest thing since sliced bread because you won the robotics competition in 10th grade, but really it's all about how you've grown as a person and the perspective you're going to carry with you. I wrote about taking a walk with my mom in a neighborhood where every 4th home was identical to itself, and it wasn't a lavish neighborhood by any stretch of the imagination. You can literally write about anything. I just wrote about how what my mom told me made me think about myself, and it had nothing to do with my major. But you could write an essay about, shadowing on a medical mission to Mexico or volunteering on a service organization and some epiphany you had. There's no right or wrong essay, but what is really important on this essay is to really write about how you've grown. And again, I'm speaking very quickly. It's just a high-level introduction. We will be able to provide analysis of essays that work through my book following today's presentation. But we have one main essay for all public and private schools out of state, and all private schools in the state too. The UCs and almost every private school and out-of-state public school also have what are called supplemental essays. And these are typically 1 to 2 paragraphs in length, or less than 300-ish words, that touch on service, leadership, values, why this school, academic interests. And so, again, if we reflect back on what I just said about 5 minutes ago, these experiences are designed to flow through into those essays, because the only way they know the meaning of something to you is through the essays that you write about how you grew as a result. And so think about this. We need evidence to make the argument more persuasive. And the argument is the essays. So we want to write about how we've grown and what our goals are and the experiences that have shaped us as it relates to our college goals. That is what the essays are for. And if you have the numbers, the way they make their admissions decisions is based on the story you're presenting in the essays and activity descriptions. So let me say it directly and bluntly, if you're numerically qualified, the essays are the deciding factor for who to admit and who not to admit. So spend the time on these that you believe this process deserves. If you're drafting an essay the night before it's due and you're spending 45 minutes on it, your English teachers know when you do that. And admissions readers who read thousands of these essays, I think, have a pretty good sense of that too. So it's not that you need to obsess over this, but just be thoughtful. And it's really important to ask when you're writing these essays, am I giving them a reason to admit me in the writing? And let's be honest and objective. When I'm reading drafts of students' essays and to give them feedback, I'm asking students, I'm highlighting, it was like I'm highlighting any material or experience or reflection that I believe is demonstrating to me the value that they will bring to the school. And I asked students to do that too. I was like, highlight for me any reasons you're giving these folks to admit you. And if there's not a lot of yellow or pink or whatever color you want to use for that highlighter, I think it's time to revisit it again. And so what I encourage all rising seniors to think about in this process is get started on these essays early and spend time on them and be thoughtful. And there's still time to be strategic with engaging experiences that you may want to reflect upon. Essay prompts are the personal statement with the main essay that goes to all the private and out-of-state public universities. That prompt is available now, and you can work on it this summer. And the UC prompts do not change year over year. So as an internal metric for our students, you can get started on working on the essays in the summer. And what I would say is certain schools, and we're always happy to tell the families we're working with, like, hold off on writing, say like Emory, for example, or the University of San Diego. These are schools that are notorious for changing year over year. But the UCs, same prompts that I wrote 15 years ago, same prompts for USC, Cornell, NYU, schools like that, it's the same prompt year over year. But there are some prompts that you may not want, or schools you may not want to write. The other thing when it comes to the writing is UC, so the UCs are going to ask you prompts, or ask you to pick from prompts that include leadership and service. And guess what? The University of Washington, exact same question. The University of Michigan, exact same question. Reuse, repurpose, and modify the writing. We do not need to reinvent the wheel every time. And this is how we protect the quality of your writing by writing 10 kick-ass essays versus 30, ones where you're just eking along, and the quality of your life. We want to make this process healthy. And the way we do that is by writing really strong essays that make sense. And you can repurpose and modify the language to fit the nuances of the prompts. What we really want to avoid, though, is writing a beautiful essay to Georgetown about how excited you are to go to Cornell, because that, I promise you, will be the easiest way to be rejected from that school. So we need to do these in advance. And I encourage students to work on it this summer, because you don't have the pressure of taking however many academic classes and sports and arts commitments. So summer is a great time to work on that. And I encourage families to set aside time and encourage their students and come up with a schedule. For the students we work with, our goal as kids are heading back to summer or from summer break is to have a very polished version of the personal statement done, your 4 UC essays done out of the 8 prompts. And if you're applying early decision or early action, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, those school essays in very strong shape too. Because if you need to say, gosh, I need to study for a calculus test and first semester senior year grades matter, or work on a college essay and these both are due the same day, if something has to give, that's a lose-lose proposition. And we want to encourage everyone to be thoughtful. This process is a growing experience, and time management, goal setting, it's part of the reward from it. If you learn how to do that, you'll get to a better outcome. So that is the essay writing process, and that is the bulk of it. Yes, there is forms for the UCs or Cal States where you're inputting in your cell phone number, the classes that you took and the grades you got. That stuff, when people say, oh my gosh, this process scares me, it's not the forms that should scare you. The forms, If we don't know our email address or our cell phone number, that's a different problem to discuss on another day. But what we really want to make sure is that everyone's giving themselves time to work on the essays and the activity descriptions, which for private schools, it's 150 characters to describe what you have done. And for the UCs, it's up to 300 characters. So this is either 1 tweet or 2 tweets, depending on the school you're applying to. Very few characters. And we want to make sure that we're highlighting how we are growing and our ability to contribute to an organization bigger than ourselves. So that's the essay writing process. I think if we're taking notes on this, the goal is to be through the personal statement and the 4 UCs by the end of summer, and maybe working on an early decision or early action application. Again, for our students, the best gift that you can have in this process is to be winding down when your classmates are ramping up and stressed out. We don't want that. So start early. I now want to talk about some just general thoughts about the admissions process and how to maximize outcomes. And I'm going to close with hopefully how to adopt a healthy mindset in this process. I think the first thing to understand is with early decision and early action, and especially for these very selective private universities. So if we're just shooting for the Cal State and the UCs, perfectly fine. You can tune me out on this. But there are people on this call, I assume, that have aspirations, or their kids have aspirations for attending, I don't know, one of the 8 schools that were part of the first sports league in the United States, the Ivy League. That's all it was back when it was started, was a sports league, or schools like Stanford or USC. I think we need to be just very honest of what does it take to get into schools like this that have less than 5% acceptance rates. Is that and families are looking for every option, and I applaud that, to potentially claim one of those coveted spots to get into one of those schools. And what kind of things are at our disposal for those schools. A lot of families will say, gosh, I really wanted my kid to go to Penn. And Penn is a fantastic school. No, I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with where I went, but if that's what you want to do, great. But people will say, gosh, I look on the website and I see that the University of Pennsylvania's published early decision acceptance rate is 15%. And I like that a heck of a lot more than the 4% that is shown for regular decision. And so I'm going to encourage my kid to apply early decision to Penn because we just maxed out. Their odds are going up by 300+%. That's not 100% accurate, especially for these very selected private universities. Early decision is a recruitment tool used for athletes and mega legacies. And how do I define mega legacy? That is parent or grandparents who not only went to the school, but donated tons and tons and tons of money and like buildings. And it is very common at the Ivies and the Stanfords of the world. 3 of my 4 roommates in college, their parents donated enough money just to secure all of the students in. At the time, it was $2.2 million a kid to get into Penn. What we hear through the grapevine is that it's now at Penn 15 million. So if that's you, great. You don't need to be listening on this because that check you're attaching to the application and the name that's going on the building, you're good. But for all of us else, everyone else, you're going to be getting in, even if a cousin went to Penn or an uncle, that's not going to give you legacy. Legacy really is cold hard cash. Penn and all the schools like that who are admitting students through early decision, every now and then a student does get in the early round. We want to focus on who's getting in there and what the odds are, because you could have a perfect 36 on the ACT, you could have a 5.0, and it still may not be, you may not be that type of student that they're looking to admit in the early round at that university. And so, yes, you can just say, I get that, or I don't get it, or I refuse to believe that. Is that early decision acceptance rates for normal applicants who are applying on their academic merit do not necessarily face any better odds in the early decision at the Ivies or the Stanfords of the world. But there are some schools that are incredible universities that offer the exact same educational experience that just don't happen to be in that sports league, that do offer enormous boosts for applying early decision. And I would encourage families to just be mindful about the distinction between which schools actually give an early decision boost and which schools do not. Schools that do include schools like Tufts, Washington University in St. Louis, Carnegie Mellon, which has one of the top engineering and comp sci programs in the country. When families say we really want to, give our child, or our child wants the best odds, is I always say, like, we just really have to understand the way this process works and which schools can you pull the lever to be strategic on if that applies to you. Now, early decision is not for everyone, because if you get in, it means you're contractually obligated to attend that university. So you have to love it. And I want to be very clear, I'm not a school snob. I'm just trying to anticipate questions that some folks may be having in this, is that we need to be mindful about early decision strategy. And if paying for $70,000 to $80,000 a year for a college is out of bounds financially, and again, for 99% of Americans, like, yeah, it is, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're looking at a person that couldn't have done it in high school. That's okay. Applying the regular route. These statistics, we try to track what our students do. You can Google early decision acceptance rates at schools, but again, it's misleading with who is getting in based on sports and legacy status, and who's actually getting in based on their merits. So we just need to be very careful that the information on this is very misleading. We're always happy to share this with our students that we work with, but it's just something just to be thoughtful about. The other thing to be thoughtful about is being strategic with which major you apply to. Now, a lot of college admissions officers will come to visit, they'll do a virtual visit to Coronado High and for the students, and they'll say, oh, you can apply anything. We just want you to go with your passion. And I would agree with that. We do want everyone to follow their passion. But the UC Irvine admissions office in UCI, where I believe one of your fantastic counselors, an alumni of and a reader for, and I'm an alumni of their law school, they're the most candid of all the UC admissions offices in terms of providing information. And the Dean of Admissions for UCI last year, in an interview to UC Irvine, or excuse me, to the LA Times, confirmed that major selection matters because you are put into silos based on your major. 10% of applicants to UC Irvine applied as a biomedical science major. There are not 10% of the spots in the incoming class are allocated towards the biology department. So if you're applying for an incredibly impacted major, the question really becomes, is there a major that is adjacent to it that would allow you to switch, that is supported by your story, that may just offer a little wider path for being admitted? Every school is different. What I can tell you from my own experience is that for Penn, I applied as a religious studies major and wrote about being kicked out of not one, or two, but three different Sunday schools, and wanting to study religion from an academic standpoint, where I wasn't like compulsory by my parents as a 12-year-old, and wanting to actually study it in college. And I ultimately ended up, once I discovered that I wanted to study business, once I got there, I ended up switching majors. So some schools allow you to change majors. I just think in an era where there are hundreds of thousands of people applying to each campus, we just want to be thoughtful about different things we can do to help us stand out from the rest. And you can, and just to be mindful of that. So as a recap, what I would say is it's, the second half of March right now. We want to take stock of summer and our service, our leadership, and exploring our academic interests. I would say that is mission critical at this stage. In the summer, moving to a full court press on working on essays and making as much progress as possible on that. And then trying to wind down this process in early fall. There are strategies to be had and tips and suggestions when it comes to the essays and what activities to engage in. We're always happy to support Coronado students through this journey. But I want to just say that that's from a timeline perspective. It's really important now to start thinking about what schools we want to apply to and being honest, do we have the numbers to be a competitive applicant? And what are our backups? And which schools bring us closer to our long-term goals? And on that note, I want to say that coincidentally, for anyone who's a school snob, and I'm a very reformed, and I mean that school snob, when I was, the age of listening in on this, it was, Ivy or UC or bust. But it took me, only a couple weeks of college to realize that that was a very misguided approach to life. Is that, San Jose State has more graduates working at Fortune 500 companies than Harvard or Wharton put together. So there's not one college that has a monopoly on the path to success. And I think this process rewards students and their families who keep an incredibly open mind and focused on the long-term goals. Is if the end all be all is where we apply and where we go to college, that means we will have peaked in college and we will be missing the boat. College is a stepping stone to health, happiness, and financial independence for what comes next. My best friend who turns from Penn, who turns 35 next week, he has 2 Ivy League degrees. He's never been able to have a full-time permanent employed position. Doesn't really need to work. I think that's part of the problem, but just simply going to a Stanford or a Harvard, it doesn't mean the red carpet is going to be rolled out for you. This process, and I have students. I have a student who applied to the entire Ivy League in one backup school. Guess what? She ended up at that one backup school, and she was heartbroken and crushed. And I begged her to apply to other schools, but she's now at her backup, which is a fantastic school. It's George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And when she discovered that her passion was international business by being at GW and being in the nation's capital, she has been hustling, and she just landed an internship at a think tank and screenshotted a email chain back and forth with a former US senator that she's coordinating to speak at one of their events coming up. And I am just so happy for this particular student, because she is now seeing that by attending a school that she was not that excited about, that she was the keeper of her own destiny, and she is able to make the magic happen if she's willing to go out and hustle. And by placing herself in a position where there's incredible internship opportunities and networking opportunities, about being in a place like DC, she is doing things that just wouldn't necessarily be possible at any other school. And so there is not one college that has a monopoly on the path to success. For many students who say, I'm either going to UCLA or I'm not going to college, you can manage to get into UCLA by starting off at Southwestern or San Diego City College with relative ease. So there's so many different ways to skin this cat that can work for any family's budgets, that can and should be tailored to where a student is emotionally in their development, passion-wise, skill-wise. Is that I think we just really need to be honest and open to the fact that this process should be unique as every one of our kids. And that if we stay true to ourselves and believe in our capabilities, we will be able to do things that actually help us get closer to our goals. And so I know when we talk about college, there probably was a collective, groan, or maybe it's now just anxious, like finger tapping or something like that. I don't know if anyone could hear me doing that on my desk. But this process, the reason I love this process and why this process is my passion in helping students navigate it is because if done right, by focusing on helping identify opportunities that fit our kids' long-term goals, and where we can learn how to tell our unique story and advocate for ourselves through these essays, and learn how to be strategic with developing skills and perspective that colleges or grad schools or employers or investors in the future, if you start a business, want. We're gaining skills to prepare us for everything that comes through in life. And that's why we should be excited about this process. Yes, at those 50 most applied to colleges in the country, it's incredibly tough to get into. But regardless of outcome, with an open mind and a focus on how this brings us closer to our long-term goals, I can actually guarantee that everyone will embark on a path where they'll bring them closer to that. And that's why we should all be very excited. So yes, it's stressful and it's a lot of work applying to college, but it can be done if we do it in a healthy way. I promise you, your children will grow through this process. And so I think we just really need to be honest with ourselves. Are we being healthy as we go with it? Or are we chasing name brands? I love when a parent says to me, my child's so passionate about business and they want to go to Vanderbilt. And I'm like, that's great, but Vandy only has an economics program. They don't even have a business major. So what's the real reason? Is it just the bumper sticker on the car? Or is it because it's the right experience? Or my child loves nature, and then NYU is the top choice. Okay, I don't know. I lived in New York for a year after college. Besides Central Park, not really sure what the nature was in the city, but maybe I missed something. So we want to stay true to ourselves and true to our long-term goals. And I just wish everyone the best of luck in this process, because we're applying from a school with, you've all received an incredible education, and there are incredible opportunities to grow on the island, off the island. And I just want to encourage everyone following today's call to lean into one experience that will help them grow as a person, that will help them for this process. We're always happy to provide suggestions and advice and specific recommendations for this summer for schools. I am going to share in this Zoom chat a flyer for our contact information, which you are welcome to contact with our email address and phone number. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, that is in the chat now to everyone. You can email the email address on there if you are interested in receiving chapters 3 and 4 of my book, or if you're interested in learning more about, our approach to this process. We're always happy to help. But I just want to wish everyone the best of luck. And I'm just excited for each of your journeys. And I really mean that. And I want everyone to adopt that same mindset of, yes, let's be cautiously optimistic, but let's make the most of it. And let's learn about what makes us tick and what's in store. So thank you everyone for attending today. I hope to have the chance to speak with you soon. And I don't know if Christine or Morgan, if there's anything else to close us up that you'd like to say.
We're just super appreciative that you joined us tonight. It's great information to put the process in perspective, because, the bottom line, it's students' first step on their trip into adulthood. And while it's stressful, we also see kids grow exponentially during the process. So I think you really hit on that, and I really appreciate that aspect of your talk. Morgan?
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of great information. There's a lot to think about. We got a few questions in the chat. Greg, somebody's mentioned they can't see your contact info. And then we also have another question of how many universities do you suggest a student should apply to?
Okay, so there is a flyer in the chat that you can download with our information. If that's not showing up, I'm going to just put in an email address. My partner in this business, will respond within the next 24 hours to any questions. It's alex@earningadmission.com. Question on schools: as long as you have a couple backups, you can apply to as many or few schools as you want. I reject this notion that you need to apply to 4 safeties, 4 matches, 4 reaches. It's very bimodal distribution right now. Everything's either a reach or everything's a backup. There's very little in the middle. So as long as you have a couple schools where you're getting in numerically, it's fine. I just think we need to be very honest with the workload about applying to schools. Like a Stanford has 11 short answer essays. And if you want to be a serious applicant for a school with a 1% acceptance rate, it does require a lot of thought and careful planning for those essays. So you can apply to as many schools as you want. Every school has a fee. They add up. Oh, and look at that, future college bound, 2-year-old? She's really cute. Time goes by quickly, doesn't it, for all the parents on it? We remember when they were this age, now they're about to go to college. But just be thoughtful about, if you want to apply the whole Ivy League, that could potentially be 50 to 60 short answer essays, and you don't want to just kind of do them in 12 minutes and expect, great outcomes. So as long as you have a couple backups that bring you closer to long-term goals, that's all really I encourage. What to tell a junior who's being told that the ACTs and SATs don't matter? Oh, that's a question that I think every parent asks us to tell their child directly to their face. That's not their mom and dad. It's that statistic I referenced. 75% of students admitted to highly selective schools that accept the test do. And if you're coming from a place like Coronado, it's going to be more of an expectation. For students who are saying, but I don't want to go to an Ivy League, maybe I want to go to TCU or SMU. I have students that did slightly above average on the ACT or SAT for those schools that are receiving close to full tuition scholarships. And I would say you can pay for college by doing well on the test. Even if it's like money grows on trees in our family, that's just money to invest in grad school or for a down payment on a house or something. There are better uses of money, I promise you, than tuition. CAT, what is California? What is that achievement test? Is that the high school? What does CAT stand for?
I think that might be ACT with the different letters.
Oh, okay. ACT, yes, again, strong test scores are the strongest factor, in my opinion, to for scholarships. Oh, CASP. I don't know if you all have, I don't think that helps with scholarship. I could be wrong.
Not with scholarships, but it can be used for your English and math placement once you get to college. You want to add something to that, Kristen?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, there is a thing called the Early Assessment Program through CSU schools, and the CASP can definitely help students, place within the correct English and math, and then they won't have to take any remediation courses. So that's why we definitely recommend students, fully giving their effort on the CASP scores. And I'm not quite sure about scholarships, but it will help with the placement.
Yeah, so for scholarships, we do have a resource page of different search engines to apply. If you, again, email us to alex@earningadmission.com. We're happy to share that with you for different resources. And I'll be sharing that same resource we put together with the counseling team. We always look for resources to equip families with resources. It's about being diligent, but test scores, ACT, SAT can help with that. So again, I would encourage your child. I mean, it's also learning how to process information. These tests are not fun to study for, but there are skills acquired, and that intensity and approach to testing helped me when I was studying for the LSAT and the bar exam. So no one ever wants to do it, but there's a lot of stuff we don't want to do in life that help us. And I think that would be my message to a parent of a child that's like, it's optional, therefore it doesn't apply to me. Okay.
There's a couple more questions in the chat. As soon as I download the video, it will be posted. It takes a little while for it to transfer because this is a long recording, so maybe by Friday. And then, Greg, there's a question about any comment on AP classes.
Okay, so AP, I reject AP everything. I think students should take AP classes in subjects they're passionate about that are relevant for their intended focus. It's not who takes more AP classes gets into these schools. Rigor matters on the transcript, especially for selective universities. If I can choose between two straight A students, one who took more APs and one who took less, at a school like Stanford, it's probably going to tip the balance. But if you have all APs and did nothing outside of school to develop as a leader, develop no grit, develop no passion, and you come off robotic, I know Christine reads for UCI, like there's so many people apply to UCs that don't do anything besides study. It's really hard to get into school if you don't have a life outside of your classes. So you have to pick and choose these classes wisely. Grades matter. And I would always say, if you're signing up for APs and just like, oh, it's okay if I get B's or C's in them, that's not how this process works at very selective universities. So I'd say it depends. The underlying grade on the class is more important than the AP score. They're not being phased out, AP classes. Certain schools are starting to put limits on it. In Irvine, which is like college, it's like UCLA or Harvard or bust as a community, Irvine, California. Irvine Unified is now limiting the number of APs that students can take because students are under so much pressure. We're starting to see that other private schools as well. I think just picking and choosing wisely in ones that are relevant for someone that wants to be a computer programmer. If a high school offers AP Comp Sci, they're going to ask, why didn't you take it if you're trying to study computer science at, say, UCLA? Or why didn't you take it at a community college? So yeah, I think that's important. So it depends. And then when it comes to limited opportunities for high school, everyone in the pandemic has been limited. Life has not been the same, but there have been so many opportunities. Like we had students who were doing remote Skype tutoring with kids growing up in homeless shelters. They didn't have to leave their house during the pandemic. We had kids volunteering on apps to help people that were vision impaired. There are so many opportunities. So unfortunately, to the question about it's the high schools unlimited, I reject that premise. It just requires us to be creative, and there's still so many opportunities to get involved. So if we just want to say and this is the one thing I don't ever allow us to feel sorry for ourselves in this process, is what we really want to focus on actually engaging in what's available. And there's a lot of opportunities even now, and there have been in the last couple of years. Something I really pride ourselves in, our students are all engaged, whether it's online or in person. There's tons of things you can do. And when it comes to this, anything you report on the application, you don't necessarily have to have any proof of it. But what we're seeing with increasing frequency is audits of, okay, you said you did this, we want some proof. So you do not want to lie or embellish on these applications. Look at what happened with a presidential candidate in 2020 who was running for president, who there was questions about what she disclosed on her job application as a professor, and how that all of that chatter stayed with her 40 plus years after she applied for that job. You don't want that to be your child and always have that hanging over you. Did you lie in a college applications? Or someone going to be there to say gotcha? So you don't want to lie on this, but you don't have to upload any factual evidence, but just be prepared at the end of the day that your application could be audited. And we're just seeing that with increasing frequency.
All right, well, I think that's all the questions we have in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Oh, we got one more.
So when you look at, say, UC Davis at 40% is highly selective, that's a blended transfer acceptance rate, including transfer students. If you start off at a community college and have a 3.4 and you're tagging to UC Davis, it's a guaranteed admission. You really have to look and actually understand, like, what is the acceptance rates for kids applying from well-to-do communities to these very selective schools. To me, UC Davis is less than a 10% acceptance rate for my students that I work with that are very similar and then some of them do go to like many of them go to Coronado, but it's very, very competitive at these schools. So these acceptance rates on the websites like UC Davis, it's less than 10% chance of getting in for any applicant. And I think you can even see, ask around with the seniors and see if 40% of the senior class at Coronado High is getting to Davis. The answer at any high school is no. So these acceptance rates are misleading, and the OEs are much lower. And there's just so much that goes into them that we just need to be mindful.
Greg, can I ask you one more question before we leave? Just as far as you were discussing community college and transfer, there is some shift with that. And I was just curious as to your, opinions around that.
I love, if the ultimate goal, if we're only focused on the name of the school, and again, I don't want that to be, but if it's a UC or bust mentality, and I get it, it's public, it's great weather, it's close to home. If you start off at a community college with a 3.4 from San Diego City College or Mesa or Southwestern, you can be guaranteed, not for every major, but you can be guaranteed admission to either UC Irvine, UC Santa Barbara, UC Riverside, UC Davis, UC Santa Cruz. And if you do better than that, no guarantees, but you can also get into San Diego, LA, or Berkeley. It's a whole full point lower in some cases for what you need to get into some of these schools. So I think for a low stress way, or if we're not ready to go to college, or if cost is a concern, I think it is a fantastic option. And it allows you just to get through all the GE classes that are just super impacted to get in, and why it takes most people 5 years to get out of UC now. The social experience, if you really want to do Greek life or something like that, the social experience caters to transfer students. So I think it's a fantastic option. I would say if you know right off the gate that that's the route you want to go down, fantastic. And you can go through this process, and if you don't love your options, it's a heck of a plan B. It's like, you can't ask for a better plan B. Like, we can guarantee UCI with 120,000 applicants for 5,000 spots last year, can be guaranteed.
Okay, that's about all the time we have now, so we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I will post this on the website and our PowerSchool page as soon as it's done transferring. Greg, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate everybody that showed up tonight to hear you talk. All right, great. Take care, everybody.
Have a great night. Thank you.